After the abstract, you have the introduction. In some journals and some organizations, the introduction and literature review are separate. Sometimes literature review is actually a part of the introduction. In the introduction, you have several parts. First part is the statement of your research problem, in which you explain why this problem is important. Second, you have the relevant literature or the literature review. Like I said, sometimes the literature review has its own separate section. Then you have the goals and the hypothesis and the research questions. Sometimes you briefly describe the research strategy at the end of the literature review, and you explain how the research strategy helps you to find the answer to your research question. The methodology is probably the most important part of your research report, and it has several parts. The main parts are subjects or participants, procedures, and instruments. But inside the procedures, you have several elements that you need to explain, especially in your in this course and in your final proposal. I'm going to pay special attention to the methodology, and I want you to be as specific and as detailed as possible when it comes to methodology. If you have groups, you have to explain how many groups, how the groups were instructed, and any treatment or manipulation that you had, what exactly happened. For example, if you have comparing the traditional method of teaching with computer-based instruction, you need to explain in details what exactly is the difference between these two methods. And of course, research design and statistical analysis that you plan to use in order to analyze the results and data that you collect. The next section of your research report is the results section. Usually it starts with the primary outcome of the study, and then it's followed by basic descriptive statistics. If you have inferential statistic, it comes after descriptive statistic. And finally, if you have any measure of effect size, it comes after the inferential statistic. You got to be careful that there is no conclusions or interpretation in the results section. When you're reporting your results and you mention that you, for example, used a t-test or a ANOVA regression, you also have to include the statistical significance of your test, including the type of test that used, the degrees of freedom, and also the outcome of the test. This is a sample results section. As you see, it comes right after the methodology, but it's not in a separate page. And you may also use any pictures or graph in your results section. And finally, we have the discussion or conclusion. Sometimes conclusion and discussion are separated, but sometimes they are integrated. The discussion usually starts with a restatement of your hypothesis. So you say, this was my hypothesis, and then you explain if the result actually supported your hypothesis or not. Also discuss any implications or applications of. In case you're wondering how to start your discussion, it's a good idea to think of the discussion section as a mirror image of the introduction. If you remember, I mentioned that in the introduction, you start with general things first, you become more specific, and at the end, when you specify your research questions, here is the opposite. You start with specific research questions or your specific hypothesis that you had, and you discuss if your data supported or answered your research questions, and then you try to generalize the results of your research and to explain any implications of your research, and also any guidelines for future research in this area. The references comes after the discussion or conclusion, and it's basically the list of the resources that you used. It could be books, journal article, and internet resources, and each of these resources have their own rules and regulations in APA. And this page shows you examples of how different resources are written in the reference list. And this figure helps you on how to format your references. About tables and figures, the most important thing is in your text you don't duplicate whatever is in the tables. So if you already explained something in your text, you don't need a table, and if you have some information in the table, you don't have to explain it in details in the text. Sometimes if the table is big, you use a separate page for the table or figure, but if it's not, you can put it between paragraphs. Now I'm going to show you some examples of different parts of your research. This is an example of a title page of a thesis. This is a title page for a dissertation. This is an example of an abstract, but unfortunately the running head is missing. This is an example of a free-floating table. An example of a regular table. There has to be specific amount of space between text and tables. As you see here, we have 3 empty lines between the text and the table. The same with figures. You can have a boxed figure that has a box around it, or it could be unboxed figure like this. But in any case, you have to have the caption and the legend for your figure. Again, you need 3 empty lines between the text and the picture, or between 2 pictures that come one after the other one. This is landscape figure. Like I said, sometimes you have to use a separate paper because your picture is big. Also, you have to think about the margins. That's the specific margins that you need to follow when you have a large picture. Now, there is a difference obviously between a research paper and research proposal. Proposal has 3 main parts, which includes what will be done, what may be found, and also how your research is related to other research in the area. In your proposal, you explain how data will be collected. You don't have to collect it. And also you have to explain what you expect to find. Also, you have to explain what are the implications of your expected results. In a proposal, usually you don't have an abstract because the major part of an abstract is the finding and results, but some people do that. Definitely you need a literature review, and you gotta know that in a proposal the literature review is much longer than a regular research, because this is a proposal and you want to show the importance of your research before it's approved. The results and the discussion sections are not there, but at least you have to explain the expected results and the way you plan to do statistical analysis. 2 resources that you can use to improve your writing. One is owl.english.purdue.edu. That's a wonderful source not only for APA style writing, but any kind of writing. They have a lot of resources, and particularly if you have specific questions about API, this is what I recommend most. And finally, if you go to the university website, the library has a thesis manual that you can use in writing your research paper and also your thesis or your dissertation.